I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Hello YouTube, I hope you're doing well today. Today I would like to speak to you about orchid books and which ones are better to choose and maybe some other ones that might not be for you. The two categories that I really kind of find myself splitting the orchid books in is orchid books that are on the care and something that you want to learn or research, and just orchid books that are pleasure to read. So, for example, stories, adventures, history, or orchid art. Now, in the world, I would say probably there are as many orchid books as orchid species. So, and they are quite expensive. So, you really need to kind of understand what would you like to get out of the book that you're purchasing. Now, if we start with the orchid books that are for care, now, I would not advise to actually buy orchid books for care on eBay or Amazon, only if you're really sure. The reason being is the book itself might be written by an author that lives in a completely different continent and has a completely different context on writing this book. So, for example, if I would pick up a book on how to grow orchids that's written by an Australian author for people that live in Australia, I would most likely, living in United Kingdom, kill all the plants following that guide. Or for example, in South America, if I would purchase a book on how to grow orchids outdoors, my orchids in United Kingdom might have a very fatal outcome. Now, the place where I would suggest you to buy orchids is actually in your local orchid nursery. Orchid nurseries are fantastic by picking up a literature for beginners and actually how to learn and how to progress and how to grow orchids, and they usually are very good at picking out what works for a specific region, what is relevant, and is actually what is good quality, because the orchid nursery interest is that you get passionate about orchids, that you are successful with orchids, and you come back and you purchase more. Many of the orchid care guides will be actually written by orchid nurseries. So, for example, this particular one, Orchid Growers Handbook, was written by Wilma and Brian Ritthausen, and they are the family that run the Burnham Nurseries. So at the moment, Sarah is running the Burnham Nurseries, but there are many books written by the family. So those are really, really good care guides, and they are made for the region that we are in, which is very helpful. So yeah, definitely check out your local nursery for a good beginner's guide or general care guide on orchids. Now, the other books that you might want to get is, if you are specializing a bit, you might want to get a book on a specific species, right? So, for example, book on Masdevallia, and what you want to do is you want to get a book from somebody that has grown only Masdevallias and is their life work. So, for example, I would be very interested in buying a book on Catasetums that's written by Fred Clark, because I know it's going to be an absolutely fantastic literature, and I will learn lots. And most of the time, these books are life's work for many of the orchid growers and orchid experts. So, for example, for myself, I specialize in Anguillas. So, for me, this is a Bible of Ida Lycasta and Anguilla, the Essential Guide, and it's written by Dr. Henry Francis Oakley. So for me, this book is absolutely fantastic, and you can see the quality and care that people put into books, that they write really about their life's passion. So if you're specializing in something particular, try to find a book that's written by somebody that is somebody for that specific species. The books that the other books that you might be interested in getting is books that are trying to deal with specific tasks. So for example, for me at the moment is super interesting to learn how to properly grow orchids from seed, so actually running my own little hybridization project. And so, for example, this book is excellent. It's Growing Orchids from Seed by Philip Seaton and Margaret Ramsey, and you can find it on eBay, on Amazon, and it's an excellent guide if you're interested in something like that. So yeah, do research at people that write things very specifically. I would not personally use as a care guide for how to grow orchids, for example, book like this, which is Tropical Plants. So tropical plants could be covering, starting from banana trees to palm trees to orchids. So the person who's written this book might not be such an expert in orchids, but just like a general tropical plants. And I wouldn't say that, again, this is just my personal opinion, that might be the best kind of literature to actually learn how to grow orchids. So try not to buy books that are way too generic, right? Try to whether go to a nursery if you want to learn how to grow orchids, or buy on a specific orchid species. Now, there are books that are written about specific geographical locations or orchids that come from specific regions. So, for example, orchids of Peru, of Colombia, of South America. Those books I would suggest for people that actually want to travel to those regions and search for the orchids in the wild. I wouldn't suggest those as a care guides, because orchids in nature still grow very differently from the environment we can provide them at home. But if you're interested to view the orchids in nature, if you're a bit of orchid hunting, then those are good books to buy. But personally, for me, those are not yet something that I would be purchasing or reading. Now, the other category of books is actually just, I would say, entertainment. So those are orchid stories, orchid history, and orchid art. So starting with very nicely written orchid stories or novels, this is an absolutely fantastic one if you just want a light read in the evening, and just kind of topic orchids, but just a light read and a story. So this is by John Donne, Orchid Summer, and this is actually about a guy who is searching for all the British native orchids. I absolutely love this book. It's fantastically written, so it's a great evening read. The other books, for example, is Cloud Garden. This is by this is a story of Paul Winder, Tom Hardike. Those are the two guys that got kidnapped in Colombia by gorillas in the jungle and kept in captivity. So yeah, they kind of had a bit of a fun in a jungle, both British guys. And also, for example, it's absolute classic, Orchid Fever by Eric Hansen. Again, a fantastic read of just passion of orchids. There is also a book that is written about Burnham Nurseries, so Orchid, One Family's Passion. Also a really, really nice read on how people started Burnham Nurseries, like how the family started out. So, for example, if you ever thought, oh, I would always want to open an orchid nursery at some point, read this book. It's a really, really good story. Now, and lastly, the category of books is art, or as I call it, orchid porn. Yeah. So, for example, like that, it's absolutely fantastic pictures, paintings, real size. They are absolutely gorgeous. So this specific one is an illustrated treasury of orchids in beautiful full colors. It's absolutely stunning. You can look at it again and again and again. So if you're interested in orchid arts, do search for books like that. And these are books I would buy on eBay because they're quite expensive, and getting them secondhand will really be worth. And in a similar category, I would say by Kew Gardens, the Orchid, also a fantastic, just visual book. Is an absolute pleasure just to look through it. So yeah, it's if you're into more visual pleasure, then these are fantastic books to get. The one book that I would never ever suggest you to buy personally is On How to Deal with Pests and Diseases, just because books on topics like this will get outdated very quickly. rules and regulations in every country will change on year-to-year basis. So chemical that maybe you used last year might not be available even this year. So for example, 30 years ago people were using nicotine to treat for pests. At the moment that would be unthinkable. So if you need an advice on how to care for pests or bacterial infections, do ask in your local society, do ask your local nursery, but I would not suggest buying books on that. That might be a bit of a waste of money, in my opinion. Now, finally, there are other publications on orchids that you also might be interested in. So first of all, in America, there is Orchids, which is a magazine by American Orchid Society, which you receive monthly if you are a member. The membership, I think, is in UK for the membership for American Orchid Society, I pay around $100. And I receive this magazine every month. It's a beautiful magazine full of colors. It contains newly described species, it contains awards, it contains care articles, just general stories and interesting facts about orchids. So if you're really into like kind of visual and you want this kind of a magazine type light read, it is really nice. That American Orchid Society magazine is definitely worth it. In United Kingdom, we have an orchid review that's produced by RHS. I would say this is for very, very serious growers. So if you're really, really into your awards, if you're into your judging, if you're interested in a like very deep dive in specific topics, show reports and so forth, then this is a really good magazine. So you're kind of keeping up to date on the shows in the world, you're keeping up to date who got which award, why they were awarded, any judging changes. So this is kind of a very good guide, and you get this, if I'm not mistaken, 4 times a year. But if you're a beginner, I would not recommend this personally. Then, lastly, there is an Orchid Society of Great Britain journal, and this is as part of the Orchid Society of Great Britain membership. The membership's £20, and you receive this journal 4 times a year. This journal is written from amateurs to professionals, so you might get how to repot your phalaenopsis or how to cut the flower spike articles, and you might get articles of very specific plants, on how plants got their name, or orchid travels. So a very diverse magazine. Personally, even if I would have not been part of the Orchid Society of Great Britain, I would definitely still be getting this if I wouldn't be an active member, just because it's a good read and it's a nice colorful magazine to have. And yeah, so these are kind of the magazines. I would like to finish this video, and again, buying books is everyone's preference, right? So there isn't one book that everyone will like, so that's why we have so many. But these were kind of my personal thoughts on books, what's worth and what isn't worth, and it really depends what you're into. But I would like to finish by reading the very it's actually a title page, I would say, by Eric Hansen's Orchid Fever, and he's so true. You can get off alcohol, drugs, women, food, and cars, but once you're hooked on orchids, you're finished. You never get off orchids, never. And this is by Joe Kunish, commercial orchid grower in Rochester, New York. I'll see you next time.